A forgotten mic captured a brutal fight between Jungkook and Jimin. What they said on live air left the entire studio in stunned silence. "You think you're the only one who's hurting, Jimin?" Jungkook's voice thundered before he realized the mic on his collar was still glowing red. There was a beat of dead silence, not just in the recording booth, but in the entire studio. Producers froze mid-step. Assistants dropped their pens. The tech director's eyes widened as his trembling fingers hovered over the audio board. It was too late. The audio had already gone live. The whole building, no, millions had just heard it. The door to Studio 3 slammed shut behind Jungkook. His fists clenched, veins visible down his forearms. His breath was ragged, and his eyes burned, not with fury alone, but disappointment so deep it made his jaw twitch. Jimin stood on the other end of the room, unmoving, lips slightly parted, as if trying to recall the exact moment things shattered between them. "I told you not to bring it up again," Jimin muttered, his tone colder than the steel armrests of the studio chairs. "And I told you I wouldn't lie for you again," Jungkook hissed. The hum of the still-active mic crackled softly in the silence, broadcasting every poisoned syllable to the production control room and beyond. Backstage, Taehyung turned from the screen with his hand pressed over his mouth. Even he who'd seen every shade of tension between those two had never seen it reach this level. He knew, as did everyone else who was now frantically trying to disconnect the feed, that this wasn't just a fight. This was an implosion years in the making. The show they were recording, Echoes of Youth, was supposed to be a reunion episode, a nostalgic look back on their trainee days, filled with laughter and staged anecdotes. What no one had predicted was that the final segment, where members were encouraged to speak freely from the heart, would detonate a bomb no one could contain. "What do you want from me, Jungkook?" Jimin asked, still not moving, but his voice now laced with something darker. "An apology for surviving? For still smiling while you were breaking?" "You're not smiling. You're performing," Jungkook snapped. "You've always been performing. Even when you cried, it wasn't for us, it was for them." A sharp intake of breath. Jimin blinked slowly. "That's low," he whispered. "No," Jungkook said, finally walking closer, his steps heavy, as if dragging years of buried pain. "Low was when you promised me you'd be there for my mom's surgery and never showed up. But you posted a selfie backstage at the award show 10 minutes later." That hit like a gunshot. Jimin's shoulders twitched, and his hand instinctively went to his temple, rubbing circles as if trying to erase the memory. The room around them remained frozen. No one dared intervene. Not the producers, not the stylists, not even Bang Si-hyuk himself, who was now on the phone yelling at someone to cut the stream. Jimin finally lifted his gaze. His voice trembled now, no longer frigid, but raw. "She said I shouldn't come, that it would make things worse." Jungkook's lips curled into a bitter smile. "And you believed her?" "She was crying, Jungkook. I didn't want to make her feel like she was burdening me. So instead, you let me think I was alone." Again, the mic crackled. A muffled curse from the tech room echoed, but no one moved to turn it off. Jimin stepped forward. "You think I haven't carried guilt for that? You think I sleep peacefully? You don't know half of what I've—" "Because you never let me," Jungkook roared, slamming his hand on the edge of the table. "Every time I tried to open up, you changed the subject. You cracked a joke. You pretended it didn't matter." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then faintly a buzzing sound. Someone's phone vibrating across the glass. A message notification. Then another. Then hundreds. The live comments were flooding in. Viewers across the globe stunned by what they were hearing. No camera feed, just audio. But it was enough. Jimin's hands shook slightly. He turned away, facing the soundproof wall. "I thought if I just kept performing, if I kept pretending it didn't hurt, maybe you wouldn't hate me." Jungkook's voice softened, but didn't break. "I never hated you, Hyung." Jimin turned, eyes bloodshot, lips quivering.
"Then why does it feel like you did?"
"Because you let me rot alone," Jungkook whispered. And that was when the studio lights flickered. A signal from the main booth. They had finally cut the feed, but the damage had already been done. Later that night, clips of the argument dominated every trending topic on social media. Audio engineers were suspended. Hybe released a statement calling it a technical malfunction and private miscommunication. But fans weren't buying it. They heard the pain, the cracks, the truth. Inside the dressing room, Jungkook sat with his back to the mirror, head down, earbuds in, but no music playing. Jimin hadn't spoken a word since the mic was finally turned off, not even during the drive back. As the world speculated, dissected, and screamed in comment sections, the two sat in silence, trapped in a story that had long outgrown the scripts they once followed. And for the first time in years, no cameras were watching, no mics were live, no lines were fed. Just two broken voices, and a silence that had already said too much. The air in the hallway outside the studio was thick, almost gelatinous, like it refused to move unless forced. The security lights above flickered in dull orange rhythm as footsteps echoed sharp, methodical, and filled with purpose. Jungkook's shadow stretched across the tiled floor, long and twitching, like it too was uneasy. He wasn't supposed to be here, not after what happened earlier. But neither was Jimin. The younger man reached the green room door and paused. His fingers hovered just a second too long on the handle. He could already hear voices, someone shifting on the leather couch, someone pacing. He pushed the door open. Jimin was inside, sitting alone in the corner with his knees pulled to his chest. No stylists, no staff, just him. A hoodie pulled over his head, sleeves covering his knuckles. The overhead light buzzed softly. Their eyes met. A silence deeper than before bled into the room, and then Jungkook closed the door behind him. Jimin didn't move. He didn't even blink. "What do you want?" he asked quietly, his voice sounding exhausted, like it had already broken 3 times before this sentence. Jungkook crossed the room slowly, not trusting himself to speak just yet. The memories of what had been broadcast, raw, venomous, irrevocable, pounded behind his eyes. The fragments of phrases, the pity he saw on the staff's faces, the trending hashtags. It wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a reckoning. He sat across from Jimin, the table between them like a barrier neither of them dared cross. "You shouldn't have come," Jimin said again, softer this time. Jungkook leaned forward. "Neither should you. But here we are." There was a flicker in Jimin's gaze. Regret? Anger? Maybe both. He looked away. "You humiliated me," he whispered. "In front of everyone. You humiliated yourself," Jungkook replied. "I just stopped letting you pretend." Jimin's jaw clenched. "Is that what this is now? A crusade against my lies?" Jungkook didn't answer. He didn't need to. Jimin already knew. That mic wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment the dam burst. "You think I haven't paid for what I did?" Jimin suddenly snapped, his voice cracking like thunder. "You think living with that guilt every day wasn't enough?" Jungkook's expression didn't shift. His voice, however, did. It dropped, cold and clean. "Then why are you still hiding?" Jimin froze. For a second, just a second, the facade fell. The performer disappeared. In his place sat a man unarmored, eyes glassy, breath uneven. "I'm not hiding," he said, almost too quietly. "You are," Jungkook said. "You always have. Behind the fans, behind the perfect smile, behind the brand, you smile even when you're breaking, and then you resent me when I don't." Jimin stood abruptly. "Because I don't have the luxury of breaking down like you do." His voice bounced against the walls. Jungkook flinched, but only slightly. "I'm not like you," Jimin continued. "I don't have the strength to just scream, rage, burn bridges and call it honesty. I survive by being needed, by being liked, by being fake," Jungkook finished for him. Jimin blinked. That hurt. It landed harder than any slap. "You really hate me, don't you?" he whispered. Jungkook shook his head slowly, his gaze unwavering. "No," he said. "I hate that I needed you, and you weren't there." Jimin swallowed hard. The tears threatened to rise, but he blinked them back with the kind of control that only years of media training could provide. "I was scared," Jimin said finally, "of ruining things, of being seen as weak." "You weren't scared," Jungkook said, voice low. "You were selfish." That broke something. Jimin laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that seemed foreign coming from him. "You think I'm selfish? I spent my whole life giving parts of myself away just to make everyone else comfortable. I gave up my privacy, my body, my truth, just so we could all shine as a group. And yet, when I needed you most, you were silent. I didn't know what to say. You didn't even try." The force of Jungkook's words slammed into the room. Jimin stumbled backward, emotionally if not physically, like the weight of it had knocked the air from his lungs. "Do you know what it felt like?" Jungkook asked, his voice shaking now. "To sit in that hospital room with my mother, wondering if she'd wake up. And every time the door opened, thinking maybe you'd walk in." Jimin's lips trembled. "She asked about you," Jungkook added. "Even when she was in pain, she wondered why you didn't come." The silence was thunderous. Jimin finally sank back into the chair, covering his face with his hands. When he spoke, it was barely audible. "She told me not to. She said she didn't want to ruin your image of me, that if I walked in and you saw how afraid I looked, you'd never look at me the same way again." "She was wrong," Jungkook whispered, because the silence ruined more than fear ever could. The room seemed to shrink around them. Time slowed. The air was electric, tense. "I thought I was protecting something," Jimin said, his voice ragged. "But all I did was make sure there was nothing left to protect." Jungkook looked at him, really looked. The man in front of him wasn't the Jimin on stage, not the adored vocalist, not the fashion icon. This was Park Jimin, tired, haunted, deeply human. "Why didn't you ever just tell me?" Jungkook asked, quieter now. "Even once. Why did you keep pretending everything was fine?" "Because you look at me like I'm supposed to be perfect," Jimin whispered. "And I was terrified of what would happen if I wasn't." Jungkook closed his eyes for a moment, then leaned back, exhaling long and heavy. "I never wanted perfect," he said. "I wanted real." They sat in that stillness, the world outside continuing to spin as their silence grew softer, less weaponized. There was still so much unsaid. So many years of pain buried under performances, photo shoots, rehearsals, and award speeches. But something had cracked open. Finally, after what felt like hours, Jimin spoke again. "What happens now?" Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He looked at the ceiling, as if the answer might be carved there, hidden among the fluorescent lights. "We stop pretending," he finally said. "Even if it's ugly. Even if it hurts." Jimin nodded slowly. "And if the world hates us for it?" Jungkook looked him dead in the eyes. "Then let them." Outside, the hallway began to stir. Footsteps returned. Voices rose. The managers were coming. The press already camped outside. Fans were demanding answers, statements, apologies. But inside this small green room, two men sat in the wreckage of truth. Not idols, not performers. Just two friends, maybe former, maybe future, relearning how to speak to each other with the mics off. For now, and for the first time in a long time, neither of them flinched from the silence. "Someone uploaded it," Namjoon said, holding out the phone with a still frame of the green room camera. Jungkook stared at the screen, unmoving. The thumbnail alone was damning, his hand slamming against the table, Jimin recoiling with red-rimmed eyes. The title beneath the video glared in bold. Exclusive. Jimin, Jungkook's private fight, full unedited footage. It had already hit 1 million views, and it had only been 26 minutes. Jimin was in the adjacent room, curled up on a bench by the window with his hoodie pulled tight over his head, watching the sky rather than the screen. He knew. He didn't need to see it to feel it. The world was about to tear them both apart. "I locked that footage personally," said the production manager, pacing furiously back and forth. "That room wasn't even supposed to be recording. Someone accessed the internal server. This wasn't an accident." Taehyung was the only one in the room who spoke without panic in his tone. "Do you think it was someone from HYBE?" Namjoon glanced at him sharply. "Why would they sabotage their own artists?" "Because exposure sells," Taehyung replied coolly. "And nothing sells like real pain." The room went silent. Jungkook finally set the phone down. "They said it was raw," he murmured. "That people needed to see we're human. That's what they always say when they chew us up and spit us out." "I'll take it down," said Namjoon, already dialing. "We'll contact legal." Don't." Everyone turned. It was Jimin. He had walked in without anyone noticing, his voice flat, toneless, stripped of emotion in a way that was more terrifying than if he had screamed. Jungkook stood up, startled. Jimin walked past everyone, took the phone from the table, and pressed play. For 30 full seconds, the room was filled with their own voices, their rage, their silence, their unraveling. He pressed pause, Let them see it. Namjoon's mouth opened, then closed again. Jimin, we've spent 10 years lying, Jimin interrupted. Smiling through funerals, dancing through breakdowns, thanking fans while we bled in silence backstage. We've been nothing but polished masks. His eyes met Jungkook's. Maybe it's time they saw who we really are. Jungkook took a breath, steadying his voice. Are you saying this because you mean it? Or because you've given up? Jimin didn't blink. What's the difference? Taehyung stood slowly. The difference is whether you survive this or let it eat you. There was a long pause. Then Jimin chuckled dryly. I think it already has. Namjoon ran a hand through his hair, clearly suppressing 1,000 arguments. We're supposed to release an apology in 6 hours. Hybe wants both of you in front of a camera. Together, scripted, controlled. Jungkook's knuckles went white. No. Namjoon raised his eyebrows. No, we're not doing that, Jungkook said. I'm not going to stand next to him and lie to people who just watched me bleed. They're expecting unity, Namjoon warned. They deserve honesty, Jungkook snapped. Taehyung turned to Jimin. What do you want? Jimin hesitated. I want to speak, but not from a script, not for damage control. I want to tell them the truth, even if it ruins me. You say that like you have nothing left to lose, Jungkook said bitterly. Jimin looked at him and said, I don't. The quiet that followed was not peaceful. It was the kind that precedes earthquakes, the kind that only exists in the deepest parts of grief. Hours later, they stood in the recording room. Not Studio 3, this one was different. No glam lights, no makeup, no sound engineers. Just a handheld camera, a director who looked too nervous to speak, and 2 chairs. Jungkook sat first, wearing a plain black hoodie. He didn't smile. He didn't acknowledge the camera. Jimin sat beside him, knees bouncing slightly. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap. Begin when ready, the director said, and then disappeared from view. The red light blinked. Jungkook exhaled through his nose. My name is Jeon Jungkook, he began. I'm not here as an idol today, or a singer, or a member of BTS. I'm here as a person, as someone who was hurt, as someone who hurt others. Jimin didn't interrupt. He kept his eyes on his hands. What you heard was real, Jungkook continued. It wasn't part of a show. It wasn't a skit. It was the result of years of things unsaid, of resentment, of distance, of love that turned into silence. He glanced at Jimin. I trusted someone I considered family, and I was let down. But I also failed to understand that he was carrying pain I didn't see. Jimin finally raised his head. My name is Park Jimin, he said, and I made mistakes. I avoided hard conversations. I chose silence when I should have chosen presence. I thought if I smiled enough, if I kept things light, I could keep everything from falling apart. He looked into the lens. I was wrong. The video went on for 17 minutes. No editing. No tears wiped away. No soft piano music underneath. It was raw. Brutal. Honest. When it was uploaded, it broke the internet. Some fans cried. Some were angry. Some refused to believe it. Others found solace in the fact that even idols, especially idols, could fracture, fail, and heal. But inside the company, chaos brewed. Executives demanded explanations. Sponsors threatened to pull out. Rumors swirled of solo departures, contract terminations, and disbandment. That night, Jimin returned to his apartment alone. He stood in the doorway for a long time, keys still in hand, staring at the place that used to feel like sanctuary but now just felt cold. He walked to the living room, turned on the lamp, and stared at the untouched piano in the corner. He hadn't played in weeks, not since Jungkook's mother had passed, not since the silence grew louder than the music. Then he heard a knock. He froze. He didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he walked to the door and opened it. Jungkook stood on the other side, hoodie up, eyes unreadable. For a second, neither spoke. Then Jungkook said, I don't know what we are right now. Friends, strangers, something in between. Jimin nodded. I know, but I figured. Jungkook looked past him, at the dim apartment, the piano, the empty teacup still sitting on the counter. I figured maybe we shouldn't be alone tonight. Jimin stepped aside. They sat on the floor, backs against the couch, a blanket thrown between them like a fragile truce. No cameras, no audience. Just two people trying to put pieces back together. Not perfectly, but honestly. And for now, that was enough. The elevator's ding was too cheerful for what was about to happen. Jungkook stood silently in the mirrored walls of the executive floor, fists in his pockets, heart beating just enough to keep the fury in his chest alive. The mirrored reflection showed a man in black from head to toe. Jaw set, eyebrows low, eyes unreadable. A man ready for war. When the doors slid open, the hallway ahead buzzed with tension. Phones rang. Staff whispered. Eyes darted up at him, then quickly away. He didn't acknowledge them. He walked straight to the glass doors that led to HYBE's highest floor, the executive wing. Behind those doors, every decision about their lives had been made without their input for years. Tour dates, branding deals, and now damage control. The receptionist opened her mouth to speak, but he didn't stop. No one knew who posted it first, whether it was an angry intern, a rogue fan, or someone inside HYBE desperate for chaos, but the link spread like wildfire. Within 15 minutes, every major fan forum, Twitter thread, and news media outlet was quoting it. The file wasn't just one recording. It was hundreds. Hours of unseen footage, personal interviews, unfiltered confessions, and raw footage from behind closed doors, dating all the way back to 2018. They called it the confessional files. What made it worse was how organized it was. Each member had a folder. Inside, there were date-stamped video clips, voice notes, even therapist transcriptions labeled private internal review. But what broke the internet wasn't the existence of these files. It was the one labeled Park Jimin, March 2021, Room 2B. A shaky hidden camera recorded Jimin sitting alone, eyes red, talking into a mic that had clearly been placed there without his knowledge. At first, he said nothing, just stared into space. Then finally, a whisper. I think I resent Jungkook. The confession wasn't shouted. It wasn't even angry. That's what made it hit harder. It was broken, soft, barely above a breath. Everyone sees him as the golden one, the unshakable one. And I love him. God, I do. But sometimes I wish they saw how hard I have to work just to feel worthy standing next to him. The clip was under 2 minutes, but it detonated a nuclear explosion. The hashtags came instantly. Jimin exposed, Jungkook deserves better, hidden resentment, and then the reaction videos, the fan analyses, the breakdowns. People pulled every facial expression, every award show glance, every off-camera moment, and twisted it into something weaponized. Jimin didn't post. He didn't go live. He didn't even log into his socials. He shut the world out. But Jungkook couldn't. The HYBE meeting room was in chaos. Again. Taehyung sat with a clenched jaw. Seokjin paced like a man on the verge of breaking, and Namjoon had his face buried in both hands. This is irreversible, the legal head whispered. Even if we find the leaker, the damage is... She didn't finish the sentence. Jungkook hadn't spoken since he walked in. Then, finally, in a voice lower than anyone expected, he asked, was it real? They turned to him. Did Jimin know he was being recorded? No one answered. Did he mean it? Namjoon raised his head slowly. It was a moment of vulnerability, probably from a mandatory check-in session. We all say things when we're overwhelmed. I don't care about excuses, Jungkook snapped. I want to know if that's how he's felt this entire time. Taehyung stood. You need to talk to him. Privately. I can't, Jungkook muttered. I don't know what's real anymore. That night, he didn't go home. He drove aimlessly through Seoul, past the late-night stalls, the blinking neon signs, the places they used to laugh in together, the old dorm building, the studio that used to smell like ramen and hairspray and dreams. He ended up parked outside Jimin's place around 3 a.m. For a long time, he didn't move, just stared at the building, at the single light glowing in the apartment 3 floors up. He texted one word, why? No reply. 10 minutes passed. Then the buzzer sounded. He didn't speak when he walked into the apartment. Jimin was standing by the window, barefoot, sweater too big, eyes darker than he'd ever seen. Jungkook closed the door behind him. I saw it, he said. Jimin didn't look surprised. Then you know. Know what? That you resent me? That everything we went through was fake? No, Jimin said quietly. That I was drowning, and I hated that no one noticed. I noticed, Jungkook replied. But you shut me out every time. I was ashamed. Of me? Of myself. The silence between them was different now. Not thick with anger, but heavy with exhaustion. Like two soldiers who'd survived the same battlefield only to find themselves pointing guns at each other. I didn't leak the file, Jimin said suddenly. I swear to you, I don't even know how it was recorded. I never agreed to it. You could have told me. You wouldn't have forgiven me. You didn't even give me the chance. Jimin stepped closer. I didn't mean what I said the way it sounded. It wasn't hate. It was insecurity. You were always so untouchable. I wanted to be like that. But instead, I started comparing everything, every move, every note. I never asked you to compare, Jungkook said, voice cracking. I just wanted you beside me. Jimin's voice broke. I didn't think I deserved to be. They stood there in silence, both on the verge of something they couldn't name. Then Jungkook whispered, So what now? I don't know. Do we end this? Is there anything left to save? They didn't answer. Instead, Jimin walked into the kitchen, pulled out 2 mugs, and began making tea, not as an apology, not as a fix, but because in the chaos of everything betrayals, confessions, leaks, sometimes you just need to remember what it felt like to be human. And in that kitchen, with the kettle whistling and no cameras rolling, 2 men who used to be brothers sat in silence and sipped the only thing that was still warm. The silence inside the meeting room was more dangerous than shouting. No one looked directly at Jungkook. Not Bang Si-hyuk, not the legal advisor who had spent the last 2 weeks cleaning up the wreckage, and certainly not the woman from the branding team who kept adjusting her glasses even though they weren't crooked. It was Namjoon who finally spoke. They want him gone. The words didn't hit at once. They landed in slow motion. Jungkook's mind played them back like a corrupted file, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. They what? He asked quietly. Namjoon didn't look up from the printed packet in front of him, though his hands trembled slightly as he flipped a page. The board, Hybe's top. They're calling it strategic image mitigation. They say it's the only way to stabilize the brand. Image mitigation? Jungkook repeated, his voice growing colder. They're offering him a graceful exit. Namjoon continued. Hiatus, solo development. No public blame, just fade him out. Jungkook stood. No one stopped him. He stared at the polished table, then around the room. 10 people in suits. Executives, image consultants, lawyers. None of them had blood on their hands. None of them had stood on that stage with Jimin while he trembled behind a flawless smile. This company was built on our backs, Jungkook said, his voice barely audible. On our scars, on our sweat. And the second one of us bleeds a little too openly, you treat him like he's defective? It's not personal, said the man from PR. It's about trust. The fans are divided. The brands are nervous. We've lost 3 campaigns this week alone. He didn't commit a crime. No, another voice added. But his words opened a fracture. And right now, that fracture is costing us everything. Jungkook's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. The room was spinning, but even through the ringing in his ears, he could see it. The decision had already been made. This wasn't a discussion. It was a warning. Namjoon followed him into the hallway afterward. Don't do anything reckless, he said softly. You can't protect him if you get suspended too. I don't care, Jungkook said. They're cutting him out like he's a tumor. He's not the only one under pressure, Namjoon replied. There's footage of you pushing a staff member backstage. You think they won't use that next? Jungkook stopped walking. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. Let them, he said. But if they think I'm going to sit quietly while they erase him, they're wrong. When he reached the lower lobby, he was greeted by chaos. Fans, reporters, police barricades. Microphones were shoved toward his face. Questions rained down like bullets. Is Jimin leaving BTS? Do you blame him for the confessional leak? Was the resentment mutual? Jungkook didn't answer. He walked straight through the flashbulbs and shouting, straight to the black van waiting near the curb. The driver turned as he got in. Where to, sir? Jungkook hesitated. Then he said, to Jimin's apartment. By the time he arrived, the air was heavy with evening fog and the smell of distant rain. The building was quiet. No guards, no reporters, just the hum of the elevator and the quiet dread building in his gut. He knocked once. No answer. Again. Still nothing. The door wasn't locked. He stepped inside slowly. Jimin. The lights were off. The apartment smelled like tea and something burnt. He walked further in, past the living room, past the untouched piano, into the hallway. That's when he saw it. A shattered picture frame on the floor. The photo of the 7 of them, BTS, young and beaming, was cracked straight across the middle. Jungkook crouched, picking up the jagged glass with shaking hands. Then he heard it. The sound of water running. The bathroom door was ajar. He pushed it gently. Jimin was sitting on the floor, back against the tub, eyes vacant. He was soaked, not bleeding, not unconscious, but not entirely present either. There were papers scattered on the floor, old contracts, training evaluations, handwritten letters from fans. A lighter lay next to the tub, unused. Jungkook's heart clenched. "Young," he whispered. Jimin blinked. He looked up slowly, his lips curved into the faintest smile. "Did you know," he said hoarsely, "that when they asked me to sign my first solo renewal contract, they made me promise not to speak about the Tokyo breakdown, as if it never happened?" Jungkook walked in carefully, kneeling beside him. "You okay?" Jimin shrugged. "I was just trying to disappear quietly. I didn't want it to be dramatic. I didn't want you to find me." "I'm glad I did," Jungkook whispered. He reached forward, gently brushing damp hair out of Jimin's eyes. "You're not alone, even if the whole world thinks otherwise." "I made things worse," Jimin said, voice cracking. "I said things I can't take back." "So did I. I can't go back out there, not after this." "Then don't," Jungkook said. "But you don't have to vanish. You just need time." Jimin looked away. "They want me gone." "They don't get to decide that. They already did." "Then I'll walk with you." Jimin looked back at him, confused. Jungkook smiled, softly this time. "If you go, I go." The silence was sharp. Jimin blinked fast. "You'd really throw everything away for me?" "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing something else." He held Jimin's gaze. "You." They sat on the cold bathroom floor until dawn, shoulders touching, water still dripping from the faucet, the city waking up around them. No cameras, no script, just 2 broken men, finally choosing each other above everything else. And far away, deep in Hybe's server room, the real leaker, still unknown, pressed send on the final file. A video of the company's internal memo, stamped confidential, dated 6 months ago. Subject line: Plan for controlled dismantling of BTS brand by 2026. The real betrayal was never between Jungkook and Jimin. It was much bigger than both of them, and it had already begun. The screen glowed with an unnatural cold light. Jungkook leaned back in his chair, hands trembling over the keyboard as he read the top of the confidential document again. The line at the top wasn't vague. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a declaration. Target: gradual controlled separation and rebranding of all BTS members by fiscal year 2026. It didn't stop there. Below it were detailed breakdowns, timelines, psychological profiles, engagement stats, brand fatigue analyses. There were names listed in columns, color-coded by marketability and risk. Jungkook's name was in red. Jimin's was underlined in yellow next to a phrase that stopped Jungkook's heart. Emotionally volatile. Handle with scripted statements only. Risk of live expression. He scrolled further, past the branding roadmap, past the contractual escape clauses hidden in legalese. He reached the final section and nearly stopped breathing. If exit requires scapegoat narrative, suggest controlled negative press targeting most emotionally polarizing member S. Maintain golden boy image of JK for corporate pivot. That was it. Jimin was never the problem. He was the plan. Jungkook didn't speak as he shut the laptop, hands tight at his sides, eyes unfocused. The office around him buzzed faintly, phones ringing, people talking down hallways. But all of it was just noise now, distant, hollow. He stood and walked straight to the door. Taehyung met him halfway down the hallway, holding a stack of forms, unaware. "They're finalizing the Wever statement." Jimin agreed to do the live "Wait, what's wrong?" Jungkook didn't stop walking. Taehyung grabbed his arm.
"Jungkook."
Jungkook turned slowly, jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck twitched. "They're not trying to protect the group," he said. "They're dismantling it from the inside." Taehyung froze. Jungkook held his gaze. They're setting us up to fail, one by one. It took less than 10 minutes for Jungkook to reach the studio parking lot. Keys clutched like a blade between his fingers. By the time he reached Jimin's apartment, he didn't even knock. Jimin opened the door, startled. Jungkook? He pushed past him, pacing the living room in sharp, chaotic loops. His breaths were shallow. They wrote it, he muttered. They wrote you off like you were a liability. Months ago. Maybe longer. Jimin stood still, trying to catch up. Who? Hybe. The board. Everyone up there with a suit and a smile. They knew. They'd been planning to end this for years, but they wanted to control the fallout, and they chose you to carry it. Jimin stepped back, visibly shaken. What do you mean, carry it? They planned your downfall, Hyung, Jungkook said, voice cracking. They used the leak to frame you as unstable, unprofessional. They want me to be the savior figure, the perfect narrative. Jimin sat slowly on the couch. They want you without me. Jungkook nodded. And they want us to smile while they do it. Jimin stared at the floor. I let them, he whispered. No. I walked right into it. No. I played their game for so long I forgot I could walk away. Jungkook knelt in front of him. Then walk now. Jimin looked up. With you? Jungkook's reply was immediate. Always. That night, a fire ignited inside both of them. Not anger, but clarity. Cold, focused, ruthless. They spent the next 3 days in silence. But not idleness. They called the one person who could help without being on Hybe's payroll, Yoongi. He didn't ask questions. He flew in from Tokyo without explanation, sat across from them, and listened to every word as Jungkook showed him the memo, the footage, and the timeline. When Jungkook finished speaking, Yoongi lit a cigarette indoors, not caring about the rules anymore. They're going to bury you, he said simply. I know, Jungkook replied. They'll freeze your accounts, void your contracts, blacklist your name. I'm ready. Yoongi turned to Jimin. Are you? Jimin didn't blink. I already lost everything else. Yoongi crushed the cigarette in the tray. Then we fight back. The plan wasn't elegant. It didn't need to be. It only needed to be loud. Exactly 1 week later, Jungkook and Jimin showed up to the press conference Hybe had orchestrated to close the chapter and reclaim unity. The chairs were arranged. The cameras were already rolling. They were supposed to read from a script. Jimin was supposed to apologize. Jungkook was supposed to assure the world that everything was fine. They wore black. They walked to the podium together. Jimin stared at the printed script on the stand, then looked up. I'm not reading this, he said. A murmur rippled through the room. Jungkook stepped forward. Neither am I. Hybe executives behind the scenes rushed forward, but it was too late. Jimin pulled the microphone closer. I've been told for years what I should say, how to act, what to wear, who to love. I've been told my emotions are a liability, that if I cry, I look weak, that if I speak, I cause damage, that if I fall apart, I ruin $1 billion empire. He looked directly at the camera, so let me ruin it. Jungkook stepped beside him. We trusted this company to protect us, but instead, they created strategies to erase us quietly, cleanly, without a trace. He pulled the printed memo from his pocket, unfolded it, and held it up. This is the real narrative, not the apology you were expecting, not the PR-crafted redemption arc. This is what they planned behind closed doors. The room erupted. Executives screamed. Security moved forward. But it didn't matter, because the live stream was global. The fans were already watching, and they had heard enough. Over the next 48 hours, the entire world shook. Fans flooded social media. Sponsors canceled deals not with BTS, but with Hybe. Former trainees began speaking out. Anonymous sources released more internal documents. The scandal snowballed. Hybe released a statement denying everything. Then another saying they were restructuring, but no one believed them anymore. Jungkook and Jimin disappeared from the public eye the day after the press conference. They didn't go live, didn't post. They simply vanished. But what they left behind was seismic. A movement. A rebellion. A reminder that sometimes telling the truth is the most dangerous and powerful thing you can do. And in a small studio in Busan, weeks later, two familiar voices recorded a song that would never be released under Hybe's name. But it didn't matter, Because the world already knew their story. And this time, it belonged only to them. The world hadn't ended. Not in the dramatic fire raining from the sky way Jungkook had once imagined, but in cuter ways. In the silence after a phone call, when the manager didn't call back. In the unopened emails. In the official statements that no longer included his name. In the murmurs behind closed doors. In the way doors once flung wide were now quietly locked. For the first time in a decade, Jungkook wasn't a brand. He wasn't a bulletproof idol. He was just a man in a hoodie walking through the back entrance of a borrowed recording studio in Busan, with no entourage, no sponsors, no protection. He liked the quiet, even if it scared him. Jimin was already there when he arrived, sitting on the studio floor in ripped jeans and an old t-shirt, knees tucked to his chest, scribbling lyrics in a weathered notebook. The lines under his eyes hadn't faded, but his stare was steady now, raw, awake. "You came," Jimin said softly. "I said I would." Jungkook set down his bag and sat beside him. They didn't speak for a moment, just listening to the soft hum of the booth behind them. It still smelled like dust and memories. They were supposed to be over. Done. Obsolete. But something inside this room felt more alive than anything the global stages had given them in the past year. Jimin handed over the notebook. Jungkook read the page once. Then again, the lyrics were rough. Some scratched out, some repeated. But the message was clear. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a confession. It was a resurrection. He looked up. "Let's record it." No label. No permission. No filters. They locked the studio doors, shut off the security feeds, and began. The song wasn't clean. It had edges. It growled in places, cried in others. Jimin's voice cracked on the second verse, and Jungkook didn't ask for a re-record. They kept it. Because the world had seen their blood now, it deserved their soul. By morning, the demo was done. They uploaded it anonymously. No credit, no face, just a title, "No More Gold." It exploded. Within hours, fans recognized the voices, the emotion, the grief, the fury. Within days, the song became a movement, a banner, a weapon. People graffitied lyrics on walls, danced to it in protest, printed it on banners held high outside Hybe's main building. The label scrambled. They issued a cease and desist. The public laughed. Hybe tried to spin. It claimed the demo was a deep fake. An AI experiment gone rogue. Jimin and Jungkook didn't respond. They didn't need to, because the people already knew. Other artists started speaking up, one by one, anonymous at first, then louder. Trainees, stylists, backup dancers, former idols whose names had been erased. They told stories of exploitation, of forced silence, of lives sacrificed for polished veneers and golden PR machines. They called it the butterfly effect, and at the center of it stood two voices that refused to stay quiet. But the backlash came, too. Blacklisting. Global music platforms removed their discography. Media outlets pulled interviews. Industry insiders warned others not to collaborate. They were radioactive. Even Taehyung, who had supported them quietly, received threats of contract termination. Yoongi's independent label was raided for contract violations. Jin, still in military service, was ordered not to publicly comment. Jungkook sat in a cafe in Daegu one rainy afternoon, staring out the window, hands wrapped around a paper cup of black coffee. "They want us to break," he said. Jimin stirred his drink slowly. "It would make things easier for them. I'm scared." Jimin looked at him. "So am I." "But I'm not done," Jungkook whispered. "Neither am I." Jimin pulled a folded paper from his pocket, another letter. This one handwritten. No return address. Just a trembling fan from somewhere in South America who said, "I wanted to die last year. But when I heard your voice tremble on that live broadcast, I stayed. Because you stayed." Jungkook wiped a tear with the back of his hand. "They think silence is stronger than truth," Jimin said. "They're wrong." The next move wasn't planned. It wasn't marketable. It wasn't sleek. But it was real. They rented an abandoned auditorium on the outskirts of Seoul. The seats were torn. The lights flickered. But the acoustics were perfect. They posted a single message on an old account. If you're still listening, come find us." They thought maybe a few hundred people would show. Over 5,000 came. Fans, strangers, outsiders, survivors. There were no gates, no security, no press, just a stage, 2 mics, and the roar of voices that refused to be erased. When Jungkook stepped onto that stage and looked at the crowd, he couldn't speak for a full minute. Then Jimin walked up beside him, and the crowd fell silent. Jungkook took a deep breath. "We don't have a company." He looked down. "We don't have a safety net." He looked up. "But we still have you." Jimin stepped forward. "We can't promise albums. We can't promise tours. But we can promise this." He pointed to his heart. "Everything we give from this moment on is ours. No edits. No filters." The crowd erupted, and they sang. For hours. Off-key. Off-script. Free. The concert wasn't recorded. But that night, the city glowed a little warmer. Not because of lights, but because of truth. And somewhere far away, inside the sleek tower of a crumbling empire, someone smashed a screen in frustration. Because even with all their power, they couldn't stop the one thing they feared most. 2 voices rising from the ashes together. There was something terrifying about silence in a courtroom. Not the silence of tension, or the kind that came from respectful order. No, this was the silence of strategy, of games played behind words, of people paid too much to say too little and still get what they want. Jungkook sat beside Jimin at the defense table, hands folded tightly, trying not to react as the Hybe legal team presented their 132-page claim for breach of contract, violation of brand clause, and deliberate incitement of public defamation. Across from them sat the lawyers, 10 of them, all in black. Not a single face familiar. Hybe hadn't sent executives. They hadn't sent managers. They'd sent their machines. The judge was expressionless, tapping her pen as she flipped pages. She'd seen idol cases before plagiarism, dating scandals, messy withdrawals. But never this. Never a case where the idols weren't running away from their past, but standing on top of it, setting it on fire. The trial was closed to the press. That didn't matter. Every fan knew it was happening. Every hashtag in the world was on fire. Some screamed for Jimin and Jungkook's freedom. Others accused them of ruining the legacy, of destroying BTS from the inside. The fan base was a battlefield, and no one could tell who was winning. Jimin hadn't spoken since they entered the room. His face was stone. Only Jungkook could feel the tremble in his wrist, under the table, where their hands briefly touched before the hearing began. The prosecution finished presenting. Then came the defense, and Yoongi stood up. He wasn't supposed to. He wasn't on the legal team. But when the attorney looked ready to launch into prepared language, Yoongi placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let me speak." The room allowed it, barely. He walked to the center like he was walking onto a stage. No mic, no music. Just eyes. He looked at the judge. "You want to know why they broke the contract? Why they posted what they did?" He turned to the Hybe attorneys. "Because they were never part of that contract to begin with." There was a murmur. Yoongi pulled a stack of papers from his coat. "I've been collecting evidence for 6 months. You want breach of contract? Let's talk about the contract itself, manipulated clauses, forged signature dates, retroactive NDAs, internal memos showing corporate plans to weaponize mental health struggles for brand restructuring." He set the documents down with a thud. "Your Honor," he said, turning back to the judge, "my friends didn't breach anything. They escaped it." That's when the prosecutor stood, and everything changed. If the defense is suggesting there was internal sabotage, then they must be prepared to reveal their source. Young didn't blink. "We are." The judge raised an eyebrow. "The identity of the leaker?" Yoongi nodded once. "Yes, we know who it is." Jimin looked at him sharply. So did Jungkook. Yoongi inhaled slowly. The footage, the confidential files, the internal memo, all of it was provided by someone inside. He turned his head and looked at the gallery, at the single person who had entered without speaking, Taehyung. The world stopped. Jimin's heart lurched in his chest. Jungkook turned his head so fast his neck cracked. Taehyung didn't deny it. He stood slowly, eyes rimmed with red, fingers fidgeting around the hem of his sleeves. "I leaked it," he said, voice hoarse. The court erupted. The judge slammed her gavel, shouting for order. Jimin stood abruptly. Why? Why would you? Taehyung looked straight at him. Because I watched you both break, and no one cared. His voice cracked. I saw the company strip you down to puppets. I saw them erase you in rooms you weren't allowed to enter. I saw the pain, the silence, the shaking, and I waited for someone to do something. He looked down. No one did. Tears slid down his cheek. So I did. The court adjourned for recess. The judge ordered an internal investigation. The Hybe legal team was seen arguing in the hallway, their entire case sabotaged by their own system. Their golden boy, Taehyung, had turned whistleblower. Inside the dressing room, Jimin sat alone on the couch, knees drawn up, chest heaving. Jungkook stood by the mirror, unable to speak. Then the door opened. Taehyung entered slowly. Jimin looked up. You should have told me. I couldn't. I trusted you. I was trying to protect you. Jimin's voice was sharp. You lied. Taehyung's shoulders dropped. I saved you. Jungkook turned. You don't get to say that. Taehyung looked at him. You think I did this to hurt you? You used our pain without asking. I used their lies, not yours. There was a long silence. Then Jimin stood, stepped forward, and slapped him. It wasn't violent. It wasn't even loud. But the room froze. Taehyung didn't flinch. Jimin's eyes filled. I would have walked with you. I would have fought. You didn't have to betray me to protect me. Taehyung's voice was a whisper. You weren't ready. I was never given the choice. Jungkook stepped between them. This ends here. Jimin wiped his face. Taehyung turned to leave. But before he reached the door, he stopped. They're going to come harder now, he said. You hurt them. They'll want revenge. Jungkook nodded. Then let them come. The next morning, global news exploded with the leaked confession. Taehyung's face was plastered everywhere. Hybe stock plummeted again. A shareholder emergency meeting was called. Legal inquiries were launched. But behind the scenes, darker things stirred. Threats, anonymous messages, unmarked envelopes delivered to Jimin's sister's workplace. A staffer from their independent studio was hospitalized after a hit and run. They weren't just being silenced. They were being hunted. Yoongi met them in a hidden cafe in the outskirts of Busan. We need to go public. Fully, he said. Not just performances, not just statements. We need to testify, file civil suits, force a government audit, make them bleed. Jimin hesitated. Jungkook stared into his coffee. Then he looked up. What if we don't survive it? Yoong didn't blink. Then at least we die free.